Okay, good evening, everyone. And we are holding over here in PARSHAS BALAK. And we know that in this week's Parsha is one of the puzzling events where HaKadosh Baruch Hu gifts a non-Jew the power of prophecy on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. And he does it, as Rashi explains, just so that as time will go on, the nations will never be able to complain against Hashem. If you would have made us a Navi like Moshe Rabbeinu, we also would have accepted the Torah, we also would have lived our lives the proper way. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, good, I'll give you a chance. And we see that the Navi, who becomes the hope for the world, he ends up taking all of his powers of Nevuah, misusing them, trying to curse Klal Yisrael, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, everyone's mouth is in my control. And he ends up turning all of his klalas, all of his curses, into brachas, into the blessings. I'd like to focus tonight on one of the blessings of Balak, of Bilam, and see how it relates to this time of the year and how it gets us prepared, hopefully, for the 3 weeks. Bilam opens his big mouth and he says over the following words, Lahibit Ovin B'Yakov. Hashem does not see any iniquity in Yaakov, in the Jewish people. He doesn't see any sins amongst Klal Yisrael. Hashem Eleikav Imai. Hashem, his God is with him, meaning Hashem is with the Jewish people. Usruas Melech Boy, and the Srua, as we'll see, the friendship of the king is together with Klal Yisrael. So the verse is very difficult to understand. Hashem does not see the iniquity and the wrong, the mistakes of Yaakov Avinu, meaning of Klal Yisrael. Has HaKadosh Baruch Hu been around in the Midbar for the last, we're talking over here by the end of the Midbar. We're 40 years in the wilderness. That means that Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, that means the Meraglim, the sin of the spies. That means all the complaining, all of the lack of Amunah, all the lack of Bitachin, all the ingratefulness of Klal Yisrael. That means everything that transpired over the last 40 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I saw nothing wrong. I saw a nation that's exactly the way that they should be. What does that mean? You don't see anything. You don't see any sin. What, the Chet HaEgel doesn't count as a sin? The Meraglim doesn't count as a sin? Of course it does. So how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu see nothing? So Rashi says over here the following words. Lahibit HaKadosh Baruch Hu Oven B'Yakov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not see the sin that was in Yaakov, which was in Klal Yisrael. Kishein Oivrin al Dvarav, when they would transgress his words. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't see. He looked the other way. He didn't pay attention. Says Rashi, he would not spend too much time examining their ways, and investigate the sinful things that they did. Even when they transgressed the word of Hashem, and they transgressed HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, nevertheless HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided, I'm not going to look. You can only see something that's wrong if you're looking for something that's wrong. You can only find the fault in a person if you're looking to find the faults in a person. But if you're but if you're someone that's overlooking that which took place, and you're not focusing in on the averas, on the sins that the Klal Yisrael did, then says the pasuk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his infinite chesed and rachamim, he made it in a way that he did not see the wrong that they did. And Rashi continues, Afilu machisin, even when they would anger him, umamrim lefanov, and they would rebel against him. Einai Zov Misaychan HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not leave their presence. He did not desist from the Jewish people because he was busy looking at the good and he did not focus in on the bad. As a result of that, says the pasuk, Usuas Melech Bay, the friendship of the king is with them. Says Rashi, Loshen Chiba V'Reus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he reveals the tremendous love and companionship that he has with Klal Yisrael. Which means, says Rashi, the following idea. Of course, Klal Yisrael did a lot of wrong things in the Midbar. The whole Torah is filled with the mistakes of our nation. They begged for meat, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent quail that would come out of their nose. They begged for water, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought water out of a rock. They said, we're hungry, we're thirsty, we're parched, we're dried out. Hashem brought a plague upon the Jewish people. They said that they're missing their Amun in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They built an Egel, Hazav. They sent the spies in the Eretz Yisrael. They made many mistakes. But the Torah is telling us, with all the mistakes that they made, HaKadosh Baruch Hu opted the higher road. And the higher road is when you do not focus and dwell and look at the wrong in what a person is doing, rather you manage to find the goodness that is there inside of them. And really the Kedushas Levi, the Bardishev Rebbe, who was the master of always finding the good in Klal Yisrael, he's known for his tremendous Avas Yisrael. There are many, many dozens, hundreds of stories, the way that he looked at the Jewish people. He was once walking down the road and he sees a wagon that the wheel had broken on the wagon. And the wagon driver is changing and fixing the wheel of the broken wagon. And while he's in the midst of fixing the wheel, so the Berditchev Rebbe sees that he's davening mincha. So here you have the Rebbe walking by. You have a Yid who's trying to fix his wagon. And while he's fixing the wagon with his hands, fixing it, he's in the midst of davening Shemona Esrei. So you could look at this man and say, what kind of a davening is that? He didn't learn about a kavanah, about having intention with when you're davening. The guy's fixing a wheel and he's davening mincha at the same time. How could he do such a thing? But the Berditchev Rebbe turned his eyes to Hashem and he said, Ribono shel Olam, look how much your people love you. Even when they're fixing the wheel of the wagon, they still find time to daven to Hashem. Look how much they love you. So the Berditchev Rebbe, the Kedushas Levi, was the master in his generation of seeing the good in Klal Yisrael. And he writes over here on this pasuk, Hashem did not see the bad in Yaakov Avinu. Perush, what does that mean? Lo yiskor hara she'oisin Yisrael. He didn't remind himself of the bad that the Jewish people did. Aval hatoiv she'oisin Yisrael. Rather, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked at a Yid, he thought about the good that Jew has accomplished. The Hainu, Hashem Eloikav, Hashem is their God. Hashem would look down at Klal Yisrael. He could have looked at the Chet HaEgel. He could have looked at all the complaining. He could have looked at their destruction. No, he saw, look at the Yidden that are down there in this world. The mamlech me, they make me the king over them. That was Chokuk Etzlo, that was like engraved in front of Hashem as being a wondrous and amazing thing. And therefore, Usras Melech Bay, Mashe Mamlicha Zehu Bay. So this, that they crown HaKadosh Baruch as the king. Dahainu Shechakuk Etzloi Rak. Where does it go here? Rak al Ra Eino Mabit. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at the Jewish people, all he sees and all he remembers and all that he wants to know is the good that they have done. They made me their king. They crowned me. They followed me into the wilderness. It wasn't easy for a slave nation to do such a thing. They've been with me for 40 years. They had ups and they had downs, trials and tribulations. And yet Klal Yisrael the entire time has continued to remain as faithful as they possibly can. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he looks at us, that's all that he looks at. He does not look at the negative that is there. He only sees the good. There's a beautiful Maisa that after World War II, so the Panovich Rav, who ended up building the Panovich Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, he was managed to escape through Europe before the concentration camps got to him. And he went to Eretz Yisrael, he rebuilt Torah that had been lost in Europe with the war. When he got there, he realized that there were a lot of Yisayimim and Yisayimos. There were a lot of orphans, men and women, boys and girls that were coming to Eretz Yisrael on transport, on ships. They had no mothers, no fathers, no family. They had no living relative to take care of them. So the Panovich Rav was a Baal Rachamim, such a master of mercy. He decided he's going to build orphanages for these young men and women. And so he built what's called the Bati Avos. He built the house, the father's house for the boys. And he built the Bati Avos, he built the orphanage for the girls as well. And there in Yerushalayim, in Bnei Brak, they had the orphanage for the girls. And as time went on, the girls were healing and they were getting better and they were getting into themselves. They were becoming much more adjusted to the situation. And Shabbos in the orphanage became the most special day of the week for these young girls. They would sit together at the table, they would eat the Seudah, they would have the meal. Then they would shmooze, they would talk, they would say over Divrei Torah. And then at a certain point, they would begin to sing Zmiros on Friday night. And they would sing the Zmiros, the songs they remembered from their childhood while they were sitting at the table of their parents, who they no longer had in this world. And they would sing, and they would sing, and they would sing for many hours into the night. It gave them such chizuk, such strength, such fortitude. It was the greatest healing, the greatest medicine they can have. Living next door to the orphanage was a very ultra-Orthodox Jew in Bnei Brak. And he starts noticing that he hears girls' voices singing every Friday night. Kol Isha, the voice of a woman is erva. You're not allowed to hear such a voice. So he got very upset. And he went to the Panovich Rav. And he said to the Panovich Rav, Rebbe, he said, it's very nice that you opened up an orphanage for the girls. And it's very nice that they are enjoying themselves and they're healing and they're growing. It's beautiful. But on Friday nights, they sing a lot. And they sing very loud. I'm a frum yid, and I know there's halacha that says you can't hear the voice of a woman singing. So why should I have to suffer in halacha and listen to the voices of your girls singing Friday night when they should be singing? Sing a little bit and then stop. Sing softly, not so loud. Why should I have to hear this? So the Panovich Rav said, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to ask them to stop their songs. He said, it's a very big shaila. So he said, so go ask a shaila. So the Panovich said, fine, I will. I'm going to go to the Chazon Ish. And the Panovich Rav came to the Chazon Ish. It's probably the late 1940s. The Chazon Ish was the recognized Gadol Hador, the leader of the generation. And he comes to the Chazon Ish and he tells them the following. He says, after the war, I realized there were so many orphans, Yisayimim and Yisayimos. I built the orphanages. You know about that? He said, yes, of course. And he said, we have an orphanage here in Bnei Brak for the young ladies. He said, I want to tell you, Chazon Ish, how wonderful it's going. The girls are healing. The girls are getting better. Friday night, Shabbos in the orphanage has become something very unique and special. They shmooze, they say Divrei Torah, they spend time together, and then they sing until the night. And they sing with all of their heart, the nigunim from their childhood, from their past, from their parents. It's such a beautiful thing. And he's about now to get to the question, but there's a man next door who's complaining about their voices, Kol Isha, the voice of a woman. And the Chazon Ish looks at the Panovich Rav and he says, they're singing. The girls are singing. You mean to tell me that they got to such a place in the healing process? They were able to put the horrors and the pain of the Holocaust behind them, and they're singing Zmiros to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Says the Chazon Ish, beautiful. The girls are singing, it's beautiful. And when the Panovich Rav heard those words of the Chazon Ish, he said, there's no more question to ask. If the girls are singing, that is beautiful. It all depends what you see. You could be the disgruntled neighbor who's very, very frum, and he knows there's a halacha that says, I can't hear the voice of a woman. And he goes to the Panovich Rav and he complains. Or you could have the eyes and the vision of the Chazon Ish. And you could hear that there are young survivors of the Holocaust who came to Eretz Yisrael with not a father, not a mother, not a relative alive, with pain and suffering of Gehenna that they went through. And yet they got to such a place in their lives already that they can sing with a smile on their face. I see only the good, says the Chazon Ish. La yihibit avim miyakov. I don't remember any of the bad. I don't think about the bad. When I think about Klal Yisrael, when I look at the Jewish people, I look only at the good that is there, even if they've angered me and they upset me and they bothered me and they frustrated me. Says Rashi and says the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows how to look past all of that and only see the good. We know that on Sunday, unfortunately, will be the beginning of the 3 weeks, that very ominous time period in the calendar where we have to commemorate the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash. And the famous Gemara in Yuma asks, which one of the destructions was worse? Meaning, as the Gemara explains, the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because they transgressed the 3 cardinal sins, which was avodah zarah, idol worship, gilui arayis, illicit relations, and shvichas damim, and they committed murder. In the second Beis Hamikdash, we know that the main sin of that generation was something called sinas chinam. They hated their fellow Jew. Ask the Gemara which one was worse. Which one of these sins that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash was worse? What do you mean, which one is worse? Can you compare idol worship, illicit relations, and killing, murder on one hand, to sinas chinam on the other hand, hatred? And yet the Gemara asks, as a davar pashit, as a simple question, which one was worse? And the Gemara says, Puk chazi, go and take a look. The first Beis Hamikdash, which was destroyed because of the 3 cardinal sins, it was rebuilt. It must mean that Klal Yisrael did tshuva and they got past the mistakes that they made. But the second Beis Hamikdash, which was destroyed because of sinas chinam, if you go to a place called Yerushalayim HaKodesh and you look out by the Kaisel, the only remnant that is left, you'll see that the Beis Hamikdash is still lying in ruins. Therefore, says the Gemara, it must be that sinas chinam, hatred, one Jew for another, looking at the bad in Klal Yisrael instead of seeing the good, is worse than all of the 3 that were put together. Fascinating statement that the Gemara makes. The Maharal explains that these 3 sins are so terrible because they are the antithesis of what a Jew is supposed to be. A Jew is a maimin in the Rebbeinu Shalom. They believe in Hashem. That's Anoich Hashem, the first of the Yiseres HaDibros. Avodah Zarah shows you have no amun in Hashem. A Jew is supposed to be the nation of morality, the or la'amim. We are the light unto the nations because of the moral compass that we have. Gilui arayis, illicit relations, is the hotbed of immorality of the world. And we are the nation that believes in the sanctity and the glory of a neshama, of a person, and the potential that resides in each and every one of us. Shvichas damim, going and murdering and killing another person, it shows that you do not have an appreciation at all for the sanctity and the protection of life and the tzelem Elokim that resides in that person. And therefore, says the Maharal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had no choice but to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, because the nation was enveloped in a lifestyle that was the opposite of what a Jew is supposed to be. So it must mean then that sinas chinam, hating one Jew in your heart, looking at them in the wrong way and in a bad way, it must be that it's the opposite of what a Jew is supposed to be. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I have no choice but to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Because since that there's a mitzvah in the Torah that says, you have to love your fellow Jew the way that you love yourself. And we are supposed to be ba'achdus, connected one with the other. If I see the bad in a Jew, and as a result of that, I come to hate that person, and it's brewing inside of my heart, nobody else might know besides me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the opposite of what a loving and a caring and a giving and a compassionate Jew is supposed to be. The Jew is like hibit of him b'Yaakov. We don't see the bad, we see the good. We don't focus on the negative, we focus in on the positive. And a person that cannot do that, says the Gemara, has put themselves into a world of chorban, of personal, spiritual destruction, which brings about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The Nitziv writes in his introduction to this commentary on the Chumash, he speaks about this idea of sinas chinam. And he says that tzaddikim v'chasidim v'amalei Torah, those people that are tzaddikim, that are chasidim, they are righteous individuals, v'amalei Torah, and they spend time learning. He says, even though at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, they were tzaddikim, they were chasidim, they were learning Torah, they were on the highest of levels, but they were missing something. What were they missing? They were not yasha, they were not straight in the ways of the world, how they dealt one with the other. Al Cain, listen to these scathing words. Because of the sinas chinam that was in their hearts, one against the other, they were suspicious of a person who did not behave or live their life the same exact way that they did. Beyiras Hashem, with fear of Hashem, Shut Saduki V'Apikoros, and they said, oh, the guy doesn't wear a hat? He must be an Apikoros, he must be a heretic. Oh, she doesn't wear stockings in the summer. She must be an Apikoros, the biggest heretic in the entire world. Says the Nitziv, when they saw a Jew that wasn't living the religious lifestyle that they were living, they began to suspect that person, not just that they were not as frum as them or practicing differently, but they earmarked them and labeled them as an apikoros, as a heretic, as a result that they said, you're not as frum as me. Says in Nitziv, you know how dangerous that is? And that's when the enemies came in and they began spilling the blood of the Jewish people, which ultimately led to the Chorban Habayis, the destruction of the temple. When Klal Yisrael gets to the point where they only see what the person is not, and they begin to judge them unfavorably as a result of that, looking down and down and down, ad kidei kach, so much so that they would call a person. It's like the yeshiva baruch comes back in yeshiva and he walks into the shul of the balabatim and he sees all the little yarmulkes on their head and he starts laughing to himself. These guys are frum. My dear son, my dear friend, you should know some of these people are frumer than you are. They come to davening every single morning, early in the morning. They push themselves to learn. They raise beautiful families. They're erlich with their tzedakah. They try hard not to speak lashon hara. Because of the size of the yarmulke, it makes them an apikoros. Chas v'chalila to say such a thing. God forbid to say such a thing. And yet that's what they thought in those days. Anyone that's not as frum as me is a heretic or a tzeduki. Tzeduki were the great arguers against the Torah who said, Torah shebechsav, the written word, that I could believe. Hashem probably came to our sin and gave it to us. Torah shebapeh, those rabbis with the long white beards, nah, they made it up themselves. That's what they begin to accuse people of. Says in Itziv, that ends up bringing about a chorban habayis. Why? He explains, Sha'akadosh Baruch Hu eino sovel tzadikim ke'ela. Hashem cannot tolerate tzadikim like this. Even if you are learning every single day and you are davening every single day and your actions have a level of kedusha and righteousness, but if you don't know how to act together with the rest of Klal Yisrael, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so what's the Beis HaMikdash worth? The Beis HaMikdash was the unifying place in the world where everybody gathered 3 times a year. We gathered, it was so tight, we were like this, but we had to stretch out. There was plenty of room for every Yid. There's plenty of space for every single Jew in Klal Yisrael. And if you don't think that way, says the Netziv, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. The Klausenberger Rebbe, who was many hundreds of stories that they say about him, from World War II, he went to Auschwitz. When he went through, he lost 10 of his children and his wife. He had one child that was left who ended up dying in the DP camps after he made it through the entire war. So he lost all 11 children and his wife. But he never wavered in his amunah. He never gave up his faith. He never stopped caring and loving Klal Yisrael and trying to get them to be the best they could be in the most difficult of situations and circumstances. He said an amazing thing. The Rabbi said that there is one thing that I miss about the Holocaust. What could you miss about the Holocaust? He said when we went on the death march, there's a very famous death march that took place at the end of the war. As we went on the death march, we were all clean shaven. Our hair was shaven off too. We marched side by side with each other. And no one knew, is the person next to me a chassid? Is he a litvak? Is he frum? Is he not frum? Nobody had any idea. Nobody even knew that I was a Rebbe, he says. We just all held our arms around each other and we tried to keep each other warm. That's all that the Jewish people did on that march. It didn't matter if you came from tremendous lineage. It didn't matter if you knew Shas, you didn't know Shas, you were very frum, you were not frum, you were Hasidish, you were Litvak, you were Sardi, you were non-Orthodox. It did not matter at all. We were all the Jews, and we're all the same. And we could all stand next to each other and try to keep ourselves warm. And if Klal Yisrael, said the Klausenberger Rebbe, would just begin to look once again at our nation like that, so that we would be a different people. We'd be a people that didn't look and see the bad. We'd be a people that would look and begin to see the good. As we come into the 3 weeks and we begin to think about this terrible sin of sinas chinam, everybody still struggles with it on some level. whether it's the person in shul who is annoying and makes too much noise, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a cousin, whether it's someone down the street, whether it's somebody in the shul, wherever it is, everybody has people that when they see them, they automatically see the wrong thing and they don't see the good. And the tikkun achet, the correction of this sin, is when we become more emulating the ways of Hashem, that we learn how to yizkor, to remember and to think about and to only see the good that is there and not to focus in on the bad. And if a person learns how to do that, so then they have conquered the Chorban Habayis, the destruction of the temple, which started with the internal destruction of our nation. And they begin to rebuild what it means to be a Jew. And when Klal Yisrael is rebuilt as a nation, then Hashem says, I'm bringing you the Beis HaMikdash because now you deserve it. Now you know what to do with it. I want to leave you off with one last story. There was a very big Baal Kiruv, somebody that was involved in Kiruv in Eretz Yisrael by the name of Yosel Palak. He was only 54 years old when he passed away. And you could imagine that the Shiva house was filled and streaming with Talmid and people that he was Makarev, that he brought close to Yiddishkeit, families that had become frum as a result of him, and the kids were learning in yeshivas. He was at tzaddik when he was alive. He didn't waste a single minute of his life. And everything that he did was for himself to serve Hashem and to get any other one of Klal Yisrael to come and serve Hashem in the right way. And after he passed away, a man walked into the Shiva house and told over the following story. It was known that after Rabbi Yosef got married, he moved his wife and his family to Tel Aviv. And he became part of the Ger Kehillah, the Ger Hasidim in those years had a Kehillah over there. And he went to teach Torah. And it was never anything really formal. He would come to shul every day. He would see who was around. He would find people off the streets. He would pull them in. He would start learning with them. And that was his life. His life was learning another piece of Torah with another Jew to bring him closer to Yiddishkeit. One day in Tel Aviv, there was a torrential downpour. And he's sitting in the shul waiting for the people to come and learn that night. Nobody comes. And he's waiting and waiting. And he realizes that it's raining so hard outside, there's no way that anyone's going to come inside. So he runs out into the street in the middle of the torrential rains. And he says, I ask you, you want to come and learn? You want to come and learn with me? I'm here right over here in the shul. You want to come and learn? But of course, you know what it's like when it's pouring rain outside. Everybody's busy with their umbrellas and their coats over their head, rushing off to their homes to get cover from the rain. So Rabbi Yosef said to himself, you know what? No one's coming to the shul. No one's even accepting my invitation. I'll go into the nearest apartment complex. I'll knock on the door. I'll find a yid to learn with. So he runs in from the rain. He runs into an apartment. He goes to the first door that he reaches. No answer. He knocks a little more. No answer. He knocks once more. No answer. He turns around. He goes like, I'll go back on the street. Maybe I'll find somebody. Gets out onto the street once again. Looks around. Cannot find a single person. He said, okay, let me go back to the door. He runs back in the apartment building. And this time he decided, I'm going to pound on the door till somebody answers. Pound, bang, bang, bang. No answer. But he's undeterred and he doesn't stop. And this time he goes bang, bang, bang. And suddenly the door flies open. And this large, disheveled looking person is standing at the doorway. The man's eyes are sullen. His face looks like he's in a dream world in another place. And the man looks at me and says, who sent you? Who sent you? Who wants to know? And Rav Yosef is looking at him. He doesn't know what this man wants. And the big man grabs him by his lapels And he looks at him again, and he asked him, who wants to know? Who sent you here? And Rabbi Yosef looks at the man, he doesn't know what to say. And he says, Hashem sent me here. The man lets go of Rabbi Yosef. And he says, I need to tell you a story. And the man says, ever since I was a little boy, I fought with my parents about Yiddishkeit. And by the time that I was a teenager, I decided to go off on my own derech, whatever that would be. My family tried to reach me, they tried to contact with me, but I didn't want anything to do with them. And I was living a lifestyle that had nothing at all to do with the frum life that they had taught me. So I cut off my ties with my family. And for the last 20 years, I've been living on my own. And I must tell you, I am miserable. I can't hold down a job. I have no friends. I never got married. I don't have a wife. I have no children. I have no connection to anyone. And today I told myself, that's it. That's the end. I'm done with this life. And I was going to end my life. To prove the point, the man tells Yosef, follow me. And he walks him into his bedroom and he sees hanging from a beam on the ceiling a noose that he was about to hang himself in. The man says, I was about to hang myself. And I decided to have one last conversation with Hashem. And I said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you really want me to live, and you want me to be alive, and you want me back, then you send me a sign right now. I'm taking my life. No sooner had I said those words than I started hearing knocking on my door. I said, I can't be. I thought I'm hearing things. So I prepared the noose to hang myself. Someone's knocking at my door in the rain. And then I hear it again. I put down the noose. I run to the door. I open the door. And there's nobody there. I said, my mind must be playing tricks with me. So I went back to the room. I put the noose around my neck. And I was ready to take the jump and kill myself. And suddenly I hear bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. I run to the door and there you are. And that's why I ask you, who sent you? How did you get here? Who wants to know what I'm doing? And then you tell me, Hashem is the one who sent you? So the man began crying. And Yosel took his hand and he caressed it and he calmed him down and they spoke well into the night. And he says, your father Yosel, he ended up speaking to this man for hours and hours. He rehabilitated him. He started learning Torah with him. He brought him back to himself. He got him to the point where he was ready and able enough to get married. He got married as a family. And then it's silent in the Shiva house. And the man looks at the children and the wife of Yosef and he says, I am that man. Your father saved my life. And then he broke down crying uncontrollably. Could you imagine going into a room, having this gigantic ogre of a man look at you, threaten you, hold you by the lapels, threatened to kill you almost? Then he tells you his life story. The man is a Nebach Shebenebach. But Rav Yosef Polchik only saw the goodness that was in this man, and he brought back all the good, that pure neshama that he had from the time that he was born and he was a little kid, till he got him to the point where he was once again a member of the Torah world of Klal Yisrael. He got married, he has children, and he has moved forward in his life. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Klal Yisrael, I watched you in the wilderness. I saw all your mistakes. I saw the downfalls, the pitfalls, the challenges that you failed. I saw it all. But when I look at you, Yid, Klal Yisrael, I don't look at the wrong that is there. On the other hand, I look only at the good that is there inside of you. I overlook the negativity. And that's why Suas Melech Boy, the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, the friendship, the companionship that he has, Hashem Elokav, Ima HaKadosh Baruch Hu is together with us. Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, as we approach the 3 weeks, and we are well aware, and unfortunately too well versed in the sin of Sinas Chinam, we have to keep in mind to ourselves whether they're a Chassid or a Litvak, from, not from, non-Orthodox, it doesn't matter. A Yid is a Yid. And if we begin to see past all of the exterior and see into the interior where that beautiful neshama is, then we will be able to break the terrible trait of Sinas Chinam. We will elevate everybody in our eyes to the special person that they truly are. And in that zechus, be'ez Hashem, we will be zeicher that as the sin of Sinas Chinam destroyed Klal Yisrael and destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, we, by being Oyev Yisrael, will love Klal Yisrael. We will rebuild ourselves, rebuild our nations, and be zeicher to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. B'mheira v'yameinu.